I think that the recent impacts of the war in Ukraine on prices has brought a seriousness to the conversation. One of the most obvious options today is to maintain existing nuclear capacity, to continue generating power from non-emitting nuclear power reactors that you have today.
Hello, everyone. This is David Taejun Lee. I'm a professor of the KDI Korea Development Institute, the School of Public Policy and Management. I will be the host of today's interview as organized by Korea Energy Information Culture Agency, as known as KEA. Countries around the world are racing towards their carbon neutrality goals and objectives, developing related policies and passing the targets into law. As on top of that, due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, countries are pushing ahead their energy policies to enhance their energy security. In particular, the newly inaugurated government of South Korea is claiming that the country will actively use nuclear energy as a means to achieve carbon neutrality and energy security. So today, KEA has prepared for an interview with Ms. Diane Cameron, the head of Division of Nuclear Technology, Development and Economics at OECD, the NEA. During the interview, so we are going to discuss about changes and the trends in usage of the nuclear energy around the world, and hear about her thoughts on the energy policy in South Korea. Ms. Cameron, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure to be here.
As the pandemic is coming to an end, electricity demands has rebounded back to the pre-pandemic levels. The electricity demand is expected to increase even more due to electrification of different sectors, including technologies like electric vehicles. Furthermore, 4 months have passed since the Russian invasion of Ukraine started, and the war between the two countries are affecting energy policies around the world. How do you think the world is using nuclear energy at a time like this? I would like to ask about each continent and each country. So the European Parliament voted on July 6th to give natural gas and nuclear power green labels and under the EU taxonomy. There was a sharp division of opinions between those who approve and disapprove amongst the member of countries. How are the member states and the stakeholders are responding?
So I'm not an expert on the European parliamentary and legislative systems, so I won't describe the next steps, but you are correct in saying that a decision was reached a couple of weeks ago to approve the taxonomy, and certainly around the world, the nuclear sector around the world has taken note of this very positive decision that acknowledges the role of nuclear in decarbonization. The taxonomy discussion in the European Union was a very high-profile debate about the role of nuclear in transitions to net zero. There are conversations happening in other parts of the world on this exact topic, and in the financial community. You have the taxonomy instruments in the EU and other taxonomies around the world, but you also have the question of environmental social governance, or ESG financing, and climate financing. And I think that the decision that's been taken by the European Union is likely to have ripple effects, and in my view, positive effects on the discussions about the role of nuclear in ESG financing around the world and in climate financing, that many countries within the European Union now can move forward with their ambitions and their priorities around decarbonization and the implementation of nuclear energy to support those goals. The announcements in France by President Macron in the last year to deploy 6 new large-scale reactors with a potential of an additional 8. So 6 plus possibly an additional 8. Also a €1 billion investment in the development of small modular reactors, an innovative area of nuclear technology. So France clearly has priorities on nuclear energy, and others, Belgium, the Netherlands, Sweden, and Poland, Romania, the Czech Republic, just to name a few. So there are many countries in the European taxonomy discussion who have either made recent announcements or have had recent decisions to renew or increase their nuclear capacity.
Okay. So regardless of the argument, and unless in 20, so out of the 27 member states decided to oppose the move, which many had anticipated to be highly unlikely, the taxonomy delegated act will enter into force and apply as of the 1st of January 2023. So next question is about the United States. The United States is developing various SMR motors, and currently President Biden is offering its SMR technology as an alternative to Europe. As Europe is trying to win itself of the Russian energy. Do you think that SMR could play its role as a clean energy source replacing coal?
So I think small modular reactors, SMR, is an extremely exciting area of nuclear innovation that has the potential to make huge impacts over the course of the next 30 years and further out into the future. Yes, the United States is making massive investments, not only in SMRs, but in its domestic nuclear fleet, injecting about $6 billion to ensure the long-term operation of its existing large-scale reactor fleet. And the relationship between that and SMRs is important because in order to maintain the talent pipeline, in order to maintain the supply chain, investments in the existing technologies, continuing to operate and refurbish, maintain, and have long-term operations of the existing fleet is an enabler of innovation in nuclear. And the next wave of innovation that we see coming is SMRs. So there is a global wave of innovation in SMRs. What we mean by an SMR. So they're smaller both in terms of their size and their physical footprint. And so here, variety of sizes, but also a variety of temperatures, depending on the specific reactor concept, starting at about 285 degrees Celsius, some of them reaching as high as 850 degrees Celsius. So actually, when we say SMR, it's not one thing. It's a number of sizes and a number of temperatures. And what's really exciting about that is that it creates the potential for nuclear to reach into new applications, new markets. And so the first market that you've asked me about is coal replacement. And yes, 100% large, incrementally innovative, near-term, many of them light water-based SMRs have the potential to replace coal. Their main value proposition is to generate power on a grid. And what they offer in terms of coal replacement is the possibility to reuse as much of the existing grid infrastructure as possible. Someone might ask, well, why do you need an SMR to replace coal? Why don't you just replace coal with existing large-scale nuclear reactors? And the answer is there will still be demand for large-scale nuclear reactors in some electricity markets, but there are also some grids that cannot support a gigawatt scale reactor. There are some grids and some markets where the demand is not there for a gigawatt scale reactor. And so it turns out that 300 megawatt size SMR is really well suited to many, many power plant replacements, coal power plant replacements around the world.
The next question is about China. China's nuclear industry is one of the fastest growing industry in the world. Could you tell us more about the current status about the nuclear industry in China?
China is making enormous progress and is driving the global nuclear sector's progress. So in the West, Demand for new nuclear has been static for a long time, and in fact, there were expectations that nuclear might be phased out in some countries. But even in that context, China was moving forward with singularly the most ambitious nuclear new build program in the world, mainly of large-scale nuclear technologies, with plans to deploy 50 to 100 reactors in the coming decades. I think that China has a very realistic view of the important role that nuclear has to play. It has an enormous reliance on coal, and it needs massive amounts of non-emitting energy to develop its economy and to reach its climate targets as well.
Let's now move on to Japan. The Prime Minister Kishida has the plans to restart the idle nuclear power plants. How is the country restarting nuclear power? How is the Japanese nuclear industry changed since the 2011 Fukushima accident?
Japan has announced its intentions to continue restarting its reactors that it had previously shut down after Fukushima accident. And I believe the target is to reach 25% by mid-century, 25% of the overall electricity mix from nuclear by mid-century. So I think that what we have seen in terms of how Japan has responded to the Fukushima accident is an example of international excellence with respect to transparency, engagement, and responsiveness. Japan very engaged in the IAEA, in the NEA, and with international partners, both bilaterally and multilaterally, to draw on the best expertise possible, to do the analysis necessary to understand what happened, why it happened, and how to protect people from that type of thing ever happening again. The international community has worked closely with Japan to update safety expectations, licensing expectations, requirements on the design, and many upgrades have been made, not only to the Japanese reactors, but to reactors around the world to increase confidence in the safety. That said, Japan has many policy priorities that will determine its decisions about nuclear. One policy priority clearly about decarbonization, because when they had to shut down their nuclear reactors, they had to replace that power with fossil sources, fossil energy sources, and their emissions went up. But equally important, maybe more important even, is sovereignty and national security, energy dependence on imports. And so for Japan, the energy density of uranium as a fuel source for nuclear creates some security of supply. Compared to liquid fossil fuels and even coal, when those imports are coming from abroad, we're talking about massive quantities, massive volumes, and dependence on supply chains, international supply chains to supply those fuels. And so there is a security that can be derived from nuclear energy. Nuclear energy for Japan offers not only decarbonization, but it also offers an energy security advantage.
I would ask you to help us get a nicer understanding about global and mega trends. The sub-questions, first one is about, are there any countries that are newly adopting nuclear energy? If so, what is the rationale?
Yes, we're seeing a lot of momentum around the world. And that momentum started before the war in Ukraine, but it has accelerated in some cases as a response, we think, in part to the war in Ukraine. So I mentioned France. It's not only new embarking countries, it's actually also countries that had an existing nuclear footprint who were planning to phase out and have reversed those decisions, or nuclear existing countries that have not built new reactors in many decades and are now returning. And then the third category is countries that have never had nuclear and are embarking for the first time. And those three contexts actually share a lot in common. They're all responding to the same global drivers for decarbonization, for affordability, reliability, for resiliency, and security. So there's a group of countries who have not built new nuclear in the recent past, but had been leaders in nuclear many decades ago. That includes France, the United Kingdom, Canada, the UK, Korea, Japan. These are countries where decisions have been made in the very recent past, in the last couple of months or in the last 12 months, to start building again. There are also countries that had planned to phase out. Belgium reversed a decision on the shutdown of two large-scale nuclear reactors following the invasion of Ukraine, and actually also announced new money for SMR R&D, which represents not only a decision to maintain existing large-scale reactors, but looking to the future and to innovation. The Netherlands is planning 2 new reactors. Sweden has made an announcement that surprised even those of us in this line of work, studying SMRs, indicating its consideration of future innovation in SMRs. Singapore is looking at SMRs, has never had nuclear power before. The UAE has recently been a fantastic example of nuclear new build, large-scale reactors, a country that never had nuclear before and very successfully deployed 4 new reactors in the last decade. Saudi Arabia is making investments in nuclear, had never been a nuclear power generating country in the past. So we are seeing the conversation in every type of country around the world, those that have never had, those that had and were walking away and are coming back, and those that are looking to the future.
Some countries are keeping as aging nuclear plants. Due to the war between Russia and Ukraine, energy prices are skyrocketing and energy supply issues are arising in Europe and around the world. How are the European countries embracing nuclear energy to resolve the energy crisis?
I think that the recent impacts of the war in Ukraine on prices has brought a seriousness to the conversation. Well, the urgency of the crisis in Ukraine has us talking about heating homes in the winter of 2022-2023. That is forcing countries to look at what the options that are available today. And one of the most obvious options today is to maintain existing nuclear capacity to continue generating power from non-emitting nuclear power reactors that you have today. And so that conversation has even started in Germany, for example. No decisions have been taken because, of course, Germany had previously announced its intention to phase out nuclear. But I think that when you are confronted with the options available today, you cannot be making your decisions based on the innovations that may or may not be possible in 10 years. It's forcing a seriousness to the conversation today. And so the first impact is around decisions on keeping existing nuclear power reactors operating. And then it's forcing decisions on the planning for new nuclear and the investments in nuclear innovation. I mean, that's the immediate impact.
The new public administration of South Korea has claimed that the country will actively use nuclear energy as a means to achieve the carbon neutrality and energy security. What roles and accountability could nuclear power play in respect to carbon neutrality and energy security in South Korea?
Nuclear has displaced carbon and has provided reliable, safe electricity in Korea for many decades, and it can continue to do so. And what's really interesting is that Korea, despite the policy of no new nuclear for a period of time, domestically had continued being an exporter and a leader in markets around the world. Korea never ceased to be an important player around the world and was an exporter to markets for nuclear around the world, was a critical and important player in the tremendous success of the Baraka project in the UAE. And the world, I can tell you, has a great deal to learn from how Team Korea approaches the construction of new nuclear projects. Korea has been at the center of one of the most important successes in nuclear new build in the recent past. And so what I can say is that it will be for the Korean government and the Korean people to decide what you want, what the country needs domestically. But you have the advantage that if Korea decides that it wants to renew nuclear inside the country, Korea never lost the expertise, the talent, the know-how, and the leadership. So Korea has an advantage in some ways compared to some of the other Western economies that in the past they were leaders, but they did not build new reactors for a long time. France, UK, US, Canada are all returning to nuclear new build after long periods of no new construction. And there's real reason to be concerned about the ability of those countries to build on time, on schedule. And all to say, I think there's a tremendous potential for Korea.
So about the global megatrends and countries' actions and decisions over the use of nuclear energy. Now, so we'll close the part one of the interview. We will continue our discussion on nuclear energy issues and the important and the issues around the world in part two. Thank you very much.